the first of the year where we are recording for Athlete Builder. It's Jim Beebe and my teammate Lucas Lorian. Today we have Jesse Coomer. Reading right off his bio, human performance specialist, breath worker, author of a couple books. I have one of them right here in front of me, A Practical Guide to Breathwork. This is the first one. And then there's the other one, right? The Language of Breath, right? So Jesse deals in all things with breathing, cold therapy, heat, mindset. And if you follow along with the show, those are two of the 6 main pillars in building athletes: your recovery and your mindset. So a little bit about Jesse. I met him a little bit over 2 years ago. I wanted to get into some of the breath work and the cold therapy, so I just went online and started looking things up, and I found here's Jesse, and he's holding a course here in Indianapolis. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sign up. And went down there. It was early part of the year in 2021, I think. Yeah, 21.
Really?
Maybe
Okay.
maybe it was 22. And I went to a seminar, and when we're lining up guests for the show, I'm like, let's do something on breathwork and recovery. Pulled the book off the shelf, got his name, went to Instagram. I'm like, hey, dude, you probably don't know me from Adam, but I went to your course a couple years ago, and hey, you want to be on their show? And he's like, hell yeah, let's do that. So Jesse Coomer, everybody, thanks for being on the show today, Jesse. Good to see you again. How you been?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure. Local Midwestern guy, but been doing this almost 10 years, right? I think started in 16, right. Maybe.
So 2016 is when I started professionally, and then I officially, I guess, lost my mind on 2013, whenever I was starting with breath work and cold training. And for me, I was really looking for a better way to deal with anxiety and stress. And it was one of those things, I started exercising. That was not a big part of my life most of my life. I grew up in a small town, played some sports, but this was back when everybody was, at least where I was, all the coaches tried to make up for their lack of coaching ability by doing like Bobby Knight impressions or Gene Hackman, right, from Hoosiers. The yelling part. They're like, if I just do the yelling part, maybe that'll make up for like my totally lack
of knowledge,
of competence. Yeah.
Right.
And so it really turned me off from sports. It turned me off from just being physically healthy at all or mentally healthy at all. And I absolutely just did all the wrong things most of my first 30 years. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I was working as a English professor, and I was like, no, I got to get this under control. I think I was like 28 whenever I really decided I was going to have to do this. I went back to grad school, did a lot of these things, tried meditating, found out I just really didn't like meditating, or at least at the time I felt like, man, I suck at this, right? I don't care how hard I try to meditate, it just doesn't seem to work, And so ultimately I came across breathwork, and then that led me to breathwork and cold exposure, heat exposure, trying to understand what it is that we are as humans and how to work with it in a more effective way. And worked with crazy, awesome, cool people for a lot of years, developed my own philosophy, really feeling as though I could add to the conversation. I've published 2 books on breathwork. I think I've done, I think I'm good for breathwork for a little while, for writing about breath. I think, 2 books. I think I'm done writing about breathwork, and then actually I'm almost done with my cold training book. So, but yeah, I'm a huge nerd and a big geek about all of this stuff, and just excited to share it.
Awesome. Similarly, I'm 48, and like you were an English professor and had total change in your life and your career. So I'm 48, and in 13, I opened my gym, and my whole background is finance and investments, worked in banking, investments and stuff. So changing my career. And so, I empathize with that. Also, being a nerd, a few years ago, I think it's probably my friend Eric Frawley was talking about just reading a little bit every day. So I have been developing and pushing that habit for years now. And it's not just reading for fun, but just reading to get better. So I would read, and my wife gets me this little journal, and
Nice. Yeah.
so when I would read, or I would outline the books, and then I started outlining a little bit about Wim Hof, and then right here, here's April of 22, Jesse Coomer workshop. Here it is. So
22. Okay.
right here. So I got my notebook, and so I'm like just going through everything, and what I had done is all the books I'd outlined, I started putting on in this notebook, and then I got a little bit more advanced, and I started using OneNote. So all the books I outlined to get better. So then I start, like you, all right, I'm learning this. I've been practicing for 10 years with the gym. I'm putting together my own books and having them published just like you have. So,
Nice.
similar in that I had an epiphany. This is not where I want to be. Let's pump as much information in my head as I can to get other people better while I'm getting better along the way, and see how I can just simply make an impact, which seems to be like you. So,
Yeah.
you want to get into breath work first and then cold therapy? Is that cool?
Yeah. Let's jump right in.
So what I like, when I was going through your book, if I just go in the forward alone with breath work, every single breath determines the level of metabolism in your mitochondria, influences the pH level of your blood and tissues, communicates through the brainstem to every thought and emotion you feel, is electrically wired through the heart to influence every beat, exchanges vital information between your environment and your immune system, informs your nervous system on which organ functions to activate or suppress, determines the quality of your thoughts, attention, and actions, massages each organ in your abdominal cavity through movement of the diaphragm, literally pulses your brain and spinal fluid up and down, influences your blood pressure and level of vascular dilation, constriction, regulates the level of inflammation in the body, is an opportunity to come back to your center, as a tool to express yourself authentically. So you start up with every breath essentially counts, and with books, in sports, inches matter, right? Everything matters. Yeah. So if breath work matters that much, I'm like, dang, all right, where do we go from there? Because explain to me how all those things really happen. And, we only have, 4 or 5 hours for this show. So we'll whittle it down a little bit, but, dang, really?
Yeah. Breathing is, it is one of the most powerful modalities that you can learn to enhance just about everything. And actually, a friend of mine, I wish I could take credit for this. A friend of mine who is also in the breathwork world, who I am a big fan of. His name is Tom Granger. He said that breathwork is the one thing that affects everything, and it's true. And the reason for this, we have to go back into what we are as a human organism. And a human being is, sometimes when I talk about this, I just say that a human being is not a tree, right? So I think we can, okay, all right, we're not a tree. And it's an important distinction to make. So a tree or a plant, right? They have a survival strategy that is completely different than ours. They're amazing, right? They can make their own food. They're not getting in fights or getting stuck in traffic or anything like that. But their survival strategy is send out as many seeds as possible, find a place, stay there forever until you die, right? You stay put. And that it's great as long as that place stays fertile, right? So you got the trees that they live to be 100 some years old. It's really awesome. But as soon as there's a fire, as soon as the rains don't flow, as soon as something, there's an earthquake or something like that, that survival strategy fails. Humans, on the other hand, our survival strategy is action. So for us, every cell, head to toe, we have 37.2 trillion cells in the human organism. They all know this strategy. They all understand that the main strategy of every moment is to take action to survive. So if there's food that way, we can go that way. If there's danger this way, we can run away from that. if there's something over the hill that might be worth exploring, man, we can't help but want to explore that because we are organisms of action. And it's important and I know it's so obvious that sometimes we forget that. And the reason why I bring it up is because we forget that we live more like trees these days than we live like organisms of action, right? Where people kind of stuck in their desk. Hey, when you go to school, what do? We put you in a desk. You sit in this desk all day long. And we wonder why, we have so many, issues and all these things. We live like trees and we're actually organisms of action. Now, the big thing to understand is that there's more to us than a conscious thinking being. So we have this mind and body kind of a paradigm. And it makes us feel like there is this thing up here, right, which is somehow not in my body anymore, right? It's like there's a border at the throat, and then up. I have my brain and then my body, which is ridiculous, right? Your brain's part of your body, just in case anybody knows that. But what we have is conscious and unconscious processes, and only about 5% of the things that happen in our brain or just in general within us physically or are conscious. Everything else is unconscious. So that means our blood sugar, our vasodilation, our hormones. That means our personalities, our perceptions, everything that we don't have conscious access to is still happening on an unconscious level, and it expects us to take action. So what happens is, and this is what happened to me when I was in high school and I didn't understand it, and I wish someone would have explained this to me. What happens is when you feel nervous, when you feel stressed, all of those systems that you don't have conscious access to, they will pick up signals. They'll say there's some kind of a stressor here. We need to take action, right? Now, the only action that our organism understands is physical action, right? Because you got to understand, vast majority of human history, I mean, that was pretty much the answer, right? Okay, there's a jungle cat chasing after you. Okay, it's not like you have to sit here and do math and figure things out. You got to run, right? Or you're hungry, you've got to go forward. It's physical action that generally is what's going to make all the difference in the world as far as our survival. And so what happens is when let's suppose you sit down for your math test, right? Or you get a phone call and it's not the news that you wanted. Well, the alarm bells go off. We have unconscious processes that say, well, here's what we need to do. We need to send stress hormones. We need to engage and add more energy to this organism so we can go take physical action. Okay. Now, I promise I'm getting to how breathing gets into this, but I want everybody to understand what we are as organisms, because oftentimes we don't understand. If you don't have a good foundational understanding of what we are, it's hard to know how breathing interfaces with all this, right? So what happens, and we all like caffeine, everybody, let's suppose, actually a buddy of mine, he always tells me, it's the first cup of coffee in the morning that, is just so good. And then you're just kind of chasing that the rest of the day. But let's suppose, we like the energy that comes with coffee or with an energy drink or whatever caffeine that you enjoy. Let's suppose you felt that energy, but you didn't know where it was coming from. Right? You didn't drink a cup of coffee. That would freak you out. And that's generally how we feel when we're under stress. That's generally, oh my God, why did I feel this way? What's going on? Right? And it's because we don't have an understanding of what we are. We're like, there must be something wrong with me, or, all these things. Well, what's happening here is you are living as a modern human, as an organism that was built for actions that for the vast majority of human history, hey, you did physical action. That's how you took care of business, how you lived, that's how you reproduced, that's how you did everything. But it's not how it works so much anymore. Now we have a higher need for critical thinking, problem solving. And we have all these unconscious processes that are trying to help us survive. Let's see here. Can you still see me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. For some reason, it said it couldn't process my video. So, all right, just making sure. So, but basically, we have all these unconscious processes that are trying to help us. But sadly, in the world we live in now, they often make us feel too stressed out. They add too much energy. We can't think straight, all these things. So how does breathing interface with this? And this is where when I train first responders, when I train athletes, when I train whoever it is I'm training, we want to understand that the way you breathe is ultimately breathing itself is a psychophysiological action, which means that it is influenced and it influences your psychology and your physiology. And it's part of all the processes that we have that are generally unconscious, that you don't have conscious access to, but we actually have conscious access to this one. So if you think about like, okay, beating your heart or affecting your hormones or, your blood sugar or any of those things, we can't consciously think, okay, I want to increase my blood pressure now. Okay. Maybe you think about something stressful and maybe that might help you. But the point is, you can't do those things. However, you can change how you breathe. And that will influence the unconscious processes. And it does it through this part of our nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. And when you start changing your breathing, those unconscious processes, that autonomic nervous system starts to pick that up, and it can start to make shifts in all the expressions of your physiology. And so when, for instance, I train an athlete or a first responder, we want to help a person be able to use the parts of their brain that are responsible for critical thinking, because we want a person to be able to make good decisions under pressure. Sadly enough, high pressure situations often will start to turn that part of your brain off, which is why you totally studied for that one science test, but your mind went blank, right? Or, hey, I had to go up for the spelling bee and I can't believe I misspelled the easy word, or whatever it was. You forgot the play, or oftentimes, if coaches will tell me, so-and-so came up after making a stupid error. And I said, what were you thinking? And he said, I don't know. And that's actually the truth, because parts of our brain responsible for critical thinking will shut down when we're under high amounts of stress. And so what we can do is we can start to learn how breathing influences those processes. And it's this interesting thing about being a human. We have the capacity to influence something that is also part of the autonomic nervous system. So up until this moment, maybe our listeners or, I'm going to just start talking about your breathing. How deep is your breathing? Is it fast? Is it slow? And the more I talk about it, the more you have to focus on it, the more you're doing it consciously, right? It's like, where is it? In my chest? Is it in my tummy? But this whole other time I was giving you this long drawn out story about, we're not a tree. It was on auto, right? So it's this amazing miracle of nature. We share this aspect of being a human. We share breathing. So the conscious you and the unconscious you, if you want to put it that way, we share breathing. So whenever you consciously start breathing, you're sending a message to the other part of yourself, those unconscious processes, your nervous system. Sometimes when I say unconscious, people they're like, oh, that sounds a little woo-woo. It's not. That's the science. It's literally the scientific. I've been on a lot of podcasts where, can we talk about maybe a little more scientific? That's literally the scientific way of talking about it. But all of these,
the way I couch that to people and athletes is, when things are going fine and you're not under stress, you're able to think logically and act. As soon as the stressor is introduced, it impacts your ability to think logically and act.
100%.
Sometimes you might think more critically and act better. A lot of times people act worse. The whole phrase, you're seeing red, you're so angry, You just act. Or the phrase that, hey, hold on, take a deep breath, right? Count to 10. Those are two phrases that have been around for thousands of years. Hold on, take a deep breath, count to 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
If those phrases have been around for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years, then they probably mean something, and they probably something that's true. So you can start to impact your subconscious consciously once you stop and think about it. Hey, take a second, look around, what's going on? You just asked about your breathing. Is it through your nose? Is it through your mouth? Is it both? Right. So what I tell my athletes is that you can start to train your subconscious thoughts consciously if you actively do some things. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And an example is simple word association, mnemonic device. If you list your 3 whys of why you're working out every day on the mirror, in your bathroom, and then on your phone, and on your car, and then by the refrigerator, you're going to train your subconscious. Hey, here's why I'm working out. I'm going to keep working out. And correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing from you is you could develop some practices like working out, where you're going to work out your brain and your breathing, and then the results from working out with weights is getting stronger, right, is one. But from your brain and breathing, you're going to impact the physiological components of your own body so they can operate a little bit better, and then develop a method when you are under direct stress to have a process on how to mitigate that a little bit and still operate logically as best you can.
Right. Sometimes I tell athletes, there's 2 ways I can make you run as fast as you can possibly run, right? One is threaten your life and actually make you feel as though if you don't run as fast as you can run, you will die. Or I can make you feel incredibly safe running as fast as you can possibly run, right? Which one is the one that is the most repeatable? Well, it's the safety one. What happens is as with so much of training, we need to learn how to feel safe enough to perform at our best. And when we don't, the nervous system will continue to ramp up because it believes I need to fight, right? So we've all heard of being in the state of fight or flight, right? There's a reason
you're trying to protect yourself emotionally, physically, otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. We don't call it fight, flight, and think critically, right? we don't call it fight, flight.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be something where we're taking action, right? We're taking a physical action of moving forward and trying to fight something, or we're taking a physical action of running away. We're not thinking about anything other than, really not thinking about much at all. What we want to be able to do is say, okay, hey, we don't have to be as stressed out. Yes, you're the kicker. Yes, everyone's looking at you, right? Yes, there's all kinds of pressure on you. We want you to be able to feel safe enough to reach into all this practice that you've done and not be, sometimes we say, in our head too much, right? But what happens when we're in our head too much, we got this heavy stress. We're trying to think it through logically whenever we should just relax enough to be able to let the training take over. And we're doing that with impaired brain function. So it's like the worst of all worlds. And so when we learn how to breathe, and maybe we'll get into like some of the, I guess, some of the best practices of breathing and how this should work. But ultimately, what breath work is all about, what breath training is all about, especially as it applies to athletes. There's 2 major things that we do when it comes to athletes. One, which is this is something that's an umbrella that covers everything else, but also there's another one that's more specific. But one is we're able to help a person feel safe enough to rest, recover, and perform at their best. When you're freaking out, you're not performing at your best. That's when people have the most errors. I always tell the story about, I'm a dog person, and there's some people that are cat people, but I'm a dog person. And my dog, when the UPS guy comes to the door, will get so, oh my God, right? He gets a sudden dose of that fight or flight response, and he'll get up and he'll run into the wall, right? It being completely useless, right? I mean, he's trying to defend the house and things like that, but he's made a major
runs into the wall.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not too bright.
Well, he's an incredibly intelligent dog, but you can
Nope.
be an incredibly intelligent person and make terrible decisions, right? Because you can't, you're out of, you don't feel safe enough to even think, right? So what we have to do is we have to learn how to throttle down that stress response so that we're in more of what we might consider in sports, we call it the zone, right? So sometimes in psychology, we call it the state of flow. But basically, we want it so that we feel safe enough that we can relax enough that we can just rely almost on we do. We pretty much rely on our training. And as opposed to
that's the goal. Usually people are freaking out because they're focusing on something, usually a result, something in the future, a feeling, rejection, loss, embarrassment, ego, right?
Yeah.
When the thought process should be, in your analogy of kicking, how many yards back am I from the ball? How many to the left if you're a right-footed kicker? Waiting for the cadence to snap, and you look at the ball so my left foot goes here, my right foot goes here, and then hit this spot of the ball. So it comes down to executing your process as cleanly as you can, and then the stressors mess that all up and send it all to hell. So if you can develop a technique right before that moment, if you have a moment where you can calm yourself down a little bit, take your stress level from 100 down to 30, so you can still operate a little bit better in that moment, gives you a better chance of winning.
Yeah.
Or if you're that guy that's a breacher in the military, right, going through a door, same deal. So breathwork works there, but also what I remember from your course, it wasn't all about, hey, let's just do this in the moment. Here's how you can impact the situation on a micro level next 10 seconds. Here's your method every morning. Do this. It's going to impact you physiologically, heart rate, blood pressure, ability to deal with stress. And then you train your subconscious there so that even when you are in the moment of kicking, instead of going all the way to 100 and then bringing it back down to 30, maybe your default then is you go to 75 and you bring yourself down to 25.
Correct.
Right?
So there's so much that we want to be able to use in the moment. So, hey, I want to be really aware of my state. And if I'm better aware of my state, then I know how to direct myself, right? So I know how to use breathing to throttle up or throttle down, add energy, remove energy. But then, in addition to that, like you were referring to, there are techniques that we can use to actually overall just increase our resilience, to make modifications in our ability to carry oxygen and utilize oxygen well. And so this is another, so there's multiple aspects, multiple angles that we use whenever we train with breath work. So for instance, what might be fun? What might be fun is I'd like to take everyone in the audience. I'll take you guys too, right? You didn't know I was going to test you. Now we're going to do a test. All right. So what we're going to try, and you don't have to give me your scores. But you know what? Well, we'll just have some fun with it. We're going to test a person's CO2 tolerance. Okay. So CO2 is one of the gases that we exhale whenever we are breathing. It's one of the byproducts of the process of cellular respiration when we're creating energy. For instance, our mitochondria will take in oxygen and sugar, and then it does its magic, and then it spits out ATP. But one of the byproducts is CO2. And I tell you what, let's just do a little test. For those of everybody's listening and following along, what we're going to do, breathe normally. And of course, as soon as I say that, right, it's like, what do you mean breathe normally? It's do as well as you can to breathe normally. But what we're going to do is, whenever I tell you to, we're going to take a deep, 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 full breath in. We're going to relax it out for just a few seconds until you feel the urge to breathe. Then you're going to take a deep, 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 full breath. And then you're going to time how long you can make the exhale go. Okay. So you're going to try to lengthen your exhale as long as you can through your nose. Okay. So if you can make that exhale go all day, make it go all day. And the higher the score, the better. All right. And the only times whenever you're going to stop your stopwatch, right? Do you guys have something you can do time with?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
For sure.
So the only way you're going to stop your stopwatch is if one of these three things happen. One, if you're just out of air, right? Okay, so I've been exhaling and I'm absolutely empty. Okay, stop your stopwatch. Two, if at any time there's interruption, so if you kind of gag or if you sniff or you snort or whatever happens, if there's a pause, anything like that as you exhale, stop your stopwatch, that's your time. Number three, if at any time you swallow during this exhale, that's your time.
Dang. Okay.
All right. So
That was
just as a review,
one of my tricks I learned.
Yeah. Yeah, no tricks. And this is all about becoming more aware, right? Every athlete, every all of us, when we find a weak spot, this is a fantastic thing, right? And so if this is a weak spot, this is wonderful. We found a weak spot. We can, and it's so easy to strengthen this weak spot. So, okay. So again, we're going to take a deep breath in and relax it out, and then just hold your breath until you feel the urge to breathe. Okay. And then deep breath in, and then time the exhale through your nose as long as you can. And if one of those three things happens, you stop your stopwatch. You ready?
Time the exhale, the second one. Gotcha.
It's on the second exhale. All right.
Roger that.
All right, guys. So let's take a deep breath in all the way in. And then let it go through your nose, nice and slow, however you like. It doesn't matter. You're not timing the first exhale. Just go to empty kind of ish lungs, and then wait until you feel the urge to breathe. And then when you feel the urge to breathe, take a deep breath in and then time the exhale. There you go. Just time that exhale. Make it go as long as you can. If you can make it go all day, make it go all day. And we're just having fun. There you go. I know that face. Luke is making that face.
22.
All right. 22. Can you beat it, Jim?
There it is. 29.
22, 29. All right. So what that score is, that now this, just for those of you guys who are listening, you may still be going. If you're still going, congratulations. Continue going and just kind of see where you are. But for the sake of what we're doing today, what we're testing is our brainstem. There's chemoreceptors in our brainstem, and what they do is they measure the pH of your blood. And generally, our pH is regulated through CO2. CO2 being acidic, and so our brainstem is trying to keep homeostasis. And whenever it becomes a little too acidic, it makes you feel the urge to breathe. So it's not the lack of air or oxygen, I should say, that makes you feel the urge to breathe. It's the increase in blood pH, and in this case, it's generally mitigated by CO2. So
Too much CO2. You want to get rid of the CO2. It's not that you want oxygen. You want to get rid of the CO2.
Well, both of them are important. Okay, we want both. So in order to use oxygen,
one triggers more than the other.
Well, in the oxygen itself, right, is what we need to. We need to get that to all of our cells because that's what creates cellular energy. We have to oxygenate our tissues because that's what the mitochondria in those cells need to create more energy. Now, they produce CO2 in the process, so that's one of the byproducts. Funny thing is, it's sort of a waste, but it's also required for O2 absorption. So again, it's an amazing organism we get to be, guys. The more CO2 you produce, the more CO2 that's in your blood, the more efficiently you can utilize oxygen. So actually, we want maximum oxygen, but we also want to be able to maximize our CO2. And that's for a few reasons. One, because the more CO2 we can tolerate, the better we can oxygenate our tissues. The other reason is because if you can tolerate a little bit more CO2, you're not having to breathe as hard as quickly. Now, if a person's listening to this, I assume you have been gassed before, right? You know what it's like to give 110%, and you know what it's like to have your lungs burning because you gave your coach 100%, and you're just dying. You're like, oh my God. Oh, and we need to talk about the air's not down there, the air's up here, with the hands in the air thing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Don't let me forget. But we know what it's like to be so exerted that we just can't breathe anymore. Now, I want you to understand that whenever you are on the floor, just panting, just dying, not being able to breathe, that wasn't because you were low on oxygen. If you were to take a pulse oximeter, put the person on there, their blood oxygen saturation is just fine. What's happening there is that their CO2 production has gone up so much because they're working hard and killing it on the field. Right. Well, imagine if you can tolerate a little bit more CO2. Well, that first of all, the feeling of being completely gassed out is going to be delayed, but also you're going to oxygenate your tissues for longer. So one of the things we do with athletes is we say, okay, we want to be able to work with our brainstem so that we can improve our ability to work with these two major molecules that we use in respiration. This will enhance just about everything. It enhances our ability to use oxygen, which is going to improve your endurance. It enhances your ability to tolerate CO2, which also will improve your endurance. It also, because you're not breathing as hard, one of the things that happens when we're breathing hard is generally that's not when you're the most able to think clearly, right? We've all been there. Whenever you're like, oh my God, I can barely keep up with my breathing, that's when you're most likely to get injured. That's when you're most likely to have an error. So you're able to stay cool and calm and collected a lot longer if you have a higher CO2 tolerance. Now, there's some easy ways to get around this. So actually, let me tell you what your scores mean. Okay. First of all, congratulations. 0 to 20 is what we would consider to be weak, illness. You might be sick, might have caught a cold, something like that. So you're over that.
So we're not sick.
You're not sick.
We're just above the floor. Great.
So from 21 to 40 is what we might consider to be average. Okay. So average, everybody, kind of be walking around. Now I want to emphasize, because just for everyone listening and for my friends, this is the first time you ever took this test. We started this after lunch. You might still be processing some of your food. That will change your results. So it's better to take this test first thing in the morning or right before you go to bed, whenever you have an empty stomach. Okay. Just that will affect your CO2 production. But okay. So
where I see this from a tangible component or an application. One, the Olympic Training Center is over in Colorado at higher altitude. Right. Two, I've had athletes in my gym that want to be stronger, so they have to lift more. They're former runners, though. So if you're out of shape, your GPP, your general physical preparedness is bad, or you're just fat and sloppy. If you do a set of 15 accessories, 15 reps, you might need to wait 2 or 3 minutes because you're gassed and out of breath, like you said, before you do another set. Whereas my runners, they'll work hard to do those 15 reps. And 15 seconds later, they're like, all right, what's next? Because they recover so quickly, right? Since they recover so quickly, I can give them another set. So in a 10-minute period, they'll do 20 different sets because those distance runners, they just recover so fast. If I can give them that much volume in 10 minutes, whereas it takes someone else 45 minutes, well, my guy's going to get stronger faster, so because they recover so quickly.
And
so if we can improve go ahead. So on the football field or soccer field, when you're running those gassers and those sprints, everybody else is shot. You're the one standing up, ready to go. So if you prepare in advance more than the other guy, you're more relentless. You do this work. When everyone's running those conditioning tests, you're the one that stands at the line waiting for the next test, kind of, as Goggins would say, stealing other people's souls.
Yeah, right.
Being intimidating. Hey, I'm ready to go. When's the next test, guys? You guys are dying on the ground, pussy. Right? No, you want to kind of be intimidating. So you do this work in advance, improve your breathing, your oxygen, carbon dioxide, blood level to perform better on the field. Here's another tool in the belt.
100%. Well, and we understand when it comes to our energy pathways, right? That right now we're generally in that aerobic energy pathway, and that's where, most of our energy comes from, is the aerobic energy pathway. And then there's, the anaerobic, and then there's other ones that are really brief for incredible bursts of energy. And it's been shown that the better your aerobic capacity is, the faster you're going to recover all the other ones as well. So if we can train that person, and that's, I think, what we're saying with there, if you can train that everything else recovers faster. You're up
Yep.
for more reps, you're up for more tackles, you're up for more sprints, and you're able to recover faster especially when it comes to competition,
Right.
between these events or between plays.
So help us out here. Let's go through. I'm all about like, hey, here are thoughts, here's ideas. How do we apply?
Yeah.
Let's get better. So the process. Walk us through the morning routine. I'm going to have some questions about that, and then after we explore that, let's walk through the in the moment routine. Let's say you got 20 seconds before the next play, right? And how you can impact performance. So the long term, build in the morning, and then the short term, what can you do? So let's start with long term.
Before I get to that, I do want to just real quick cover how a person can increase that CO2 tolerance that we just tested. And
cool,
then
let's do that.
And then that's going to affect everything else as well. So one of the biggest things that athletes are guilty of is dysfunctional breathing. So last year there was a huge paper that came out. They did studies in all areas of college athletics. So college athletes, of course, they're young, they're in the best possible shape, best shape of their lives, right? And they found that 90% of college athletes have dysfunctional breathing patterns. 90%.
What's that mean? What's that look like?
That means they're using the wrong muscles at the wrong times. They're ineffective and inefficient. And
example.
So for instance, and a little quick side note. So they did football, they did tennis, they did all these. First of all, did you know badminton is a college sport? Did you know that? I didn't know that. I was not aware that you could go to college and get on the badminton team. But
not many.
100% of the badminton players dysfunctional breathing. I don't know what's going on in badminton, but we got work to do. So when it comes to functional breathing,
for all those badminton listeners.
Sorry, badminton people,
right,
wherever you are.
Nowhere.
So the thing is, just as it is important to have functional movement patterns, right? It's important to have functional breathing patterns, and it's a lot. I mean, very similar when it comes to mobility. The nervous system is going to go try to find the fastest, easiest route, right? And that's how we generally get dysfunctional patterns. Breathing patterns are very similar to that, and the problem is there's aspects of breathing that are easier to do, but even though they're easier to do, they're not as efficient. And again, this comes back to we live like trees and we don't live, active lifestyles that much anymore. Even athletes. So one of the things is mouth breathing. And mouth breathing is incredibly, I would say most people just assume as soon as you take that first step and you're jogging or running or playing basketball, let's go ahead and mouth breathe. And there's a lot of mouth breathing that just happens in everyday life. We are all right now we're mouth breathing in our exhales. Because we're speaking, right? So if you're a talker like me, that's always been something that I've had to wrestle with is mouth breathing. Now, when we're mouth breathing, a few things happen. First of all, what happens is it's easier to mouth breathe, but because it's easier to mouth breathe, what happens is it makes it easier to chest breathe as opposed to diaphragmatically breathe. Now, what that means is over time, the diaphragm, the intercostal muscles, those are our principal breathing muscles. So the diaphragm, it's interesting. The diaphragm only has 7 muscle spindles. So you really have a hard time, like every other muscle in our body, right? Hundreds, thousands of muscle spindles. That's how I can feel like, I'm, flexing and all these things. 7 in our diaphragm. And it's a good thing actually, because if it had more, we probably would get tired. We would fatigue of breathing. We don't want to do that. But it makes it difficult to feel. Am I actually flexing my diaphragm? Diaphragm only does one thing. It goes down. But what happens is if you're mouth breathing, a lot of times you just chest breathe and you don't even use your diaphragm that much. So you're not pulling your lungs down. We have to pull the lungs down in order to open up the lower lobes, which is where we get the maximum gas exchange, right? So if you're an athlete and you want to fuel your body, you have to understand your mitochondria, they use 2 things, glucose. Okay, so you're eating right. Okay, great. glucose and oxygen.
Right.
We have to have that. And if you're mouth breathing, you're exhaling so much CO2 that oftentimes we can't even utilize the oxygen we're taking in. Because
you lose that CO2, and then so your oxygen level goes down because it always balances that out.
Yeah.
Breathing through your nose, you got to shove more oxygen down through your diaphragm, which gets into your lungs deeper. So then the oxygen increases as the CO2 increases because you got more in.
You're tolerating more CO2.
So, yeah. You're tolerating more. So you're not breathing shallowly. You're breathing deeply. If you use your nose, shove more down in your diaphragm in your lower parts of your lungs. You get increased levels, activates it, increases it. Muscles perform better with more oxygen in them.
Correct. And so it'll activate your diaphragm if you use your nose. And whereas your mouth, oftentimes you're doing chest breathing. Now, the chest doesn't really have that much lung surface area. And the surface area that it has doesn't have much blood circulation. So whenever we're taking deep, full breaths, the top part of the breath is actually the least efficient at absorbing oxygen and getting rid of CO2. The bottom part is where the real magic happens. That's where you have the most alveoli. That's where you have the most blood flow. So you want to breathe through your nose, and you want to maximize the lower part of your breath wave as much as you can. So everyday breathing, we always say we want to breathe slow, low, and through the nose. And that's because we want to make sure that we're utilizing, first of all, I mean, there's an enormous, we could have a whole podcast just on how awesome your nose is for your health and wellness and all this. One of the
Not sure anybody listened, but we could do it.
Well, hey, we all know what NO2 is all about, right? Nitric oxide.
Helps cars go fast.
No, not nitrous. So nitric oxide, in the early 2000s, they came out with these supplements, arginine, so arginine, citrulline, stuff like that. You got to get the pump, right? So just so you know, those are things that convert to nitric oxide. Nitric oxide opens up your blood vessels. It's how you get your pump. It's how you get better blood circulation. But we naturally make nitric oxide in our paranasal sinuses. Actually, the vast majority of our nitric oxide delivery is through our paranasal sinuses. So when you inhale through the nose, you are getting the pump. When you inhale through the mouth, you're not getting that.
Gotcha.
So breathe through the nose for better pumps.
For better pumps, for overall better recovery. So the thing is, though, what we want to do is we want to be able to take a full breath, and we want to take it in the right order. So just as though we have better functioning, we want to have the right kind of gait in our running and all these other things. We want to have the right order in our breath. So the order it should be in is we want to expand the lower part first. So that would be sometimes I call it the belly area. So the abdominal area. We want to expand it basically as if, let's just go through this. So if you find your belly button and you measure 2 fingers below your belly button, okay, find that spot. And then if you imagine that there's a marble, like in the center of your abdomen from that point, okay, imagine that you could inhale into that marble, kind of like it's a balloon, so that it blows up like a balloon about to the size of a softball.
Okay?
Right. And then whenever you exhale, it comes back down to a marble, right? So that's your first compartment. That's everyday breathing, slow, low through your nose. That's where you should be breathing, right? Diaphragmatic breathing. It's not all about the tummy necessarily coming out. It's about expanding that whole area as if there's a tire. The whole flat tire, the tire down there. It should all expand. The next part of your breath should be your ribs. Okay, so your intercostal muscles will pull the ribs out. And if you can actually, sometimes we do this with our, you take the little L's and you find the middle of your ribs. If you can move your ribs, sometimes people can't even move their ribs because high stress, all these other situations. But if you even just move your ribs, you realize you're breathing. Right. So that's the second part of a deep breath. So belly, then the ribs, and then the chest is the last part to expand. That's a deep breath. Okay. That's filling you all the way up. Now, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. It's easier just to mouth breathe and just kind of butterfly breathe up here in the chest. But when we do that, we're exhaling way too much CO2. We're sending messages to our nervous system that we're running from a bear or something. And we're not getting an efficient breath and an efficient gas exchange. So when we train athletes, we train them, okay, we're going to reteach you how to breathe effectively. And we know this is how we're supposed to breathe. This is how we all were born breathing. It's how, if you know anyone under the age of 3 years old, breathes. It's just that over time, just like so many other things, we learn dysfunctional patterns. And so we have to reteach those functional patterns. Now, the nose is another thing. It's difficult to get an athlete, especially at first, to want to use the nose. And it's not like we can't use the mouth to breathe, but the nose is going to give you a lot of regulation, so you're not breathing too hard, too fast. And again, throwing off the regulation of CO2 and your nervous system. But what we try to do is say, if you can do 30 minutes a day of zone 2 cardio, this is zone 2, breathing through your nose, you're going to revitalize that nose. Even though a lot of people are like, other people's noses, yes, not mine. My nose is past its prime or whatever. Your nose is incredibly resilient. Zone 2 cardio, 30 minutes a day, breathing through your nose, and you're going to be surprised at just how well you can breathe through your nose in about 2, usually 3 weeks. So I wanted to go over.
You build that habit.
Yeah.
Shout out Atomic Habits, right? And you train your body because you're thinking about it consciously. So then you recover better from, in the CrossFit world, doing a WOD or from running sprints. Now the sprints isn't zone 2 by any stretch of the imagination, but some moderate cardio, you're able to withstand more pain and discomfort and then recover faster. You're essentially improving, right?
Correct.
At some point, though, when you start running sprints, you can't really be breathing through your nose all the time. Like you can maybe get 2 breaths in through your nose and then 1 through your mouth. You're trying to get back to all through your nose as quickly as you can. But at some point, you're not going to be able to, right? There's going to be some point where,
correct,
man, too much. I need to get more in quickly.
Right. And in the breathwork world right now, nasal breathing is all the rage. And it's like so many things in sports and in health and wellness. People overdo it. And so, for instance, you'll see athletes taping their mouth shut, and then they're playing, and people will applaud that. Because it's like, first of all, it's like, we've been trying to tell you all this time, breathe through your nose. And I will say, I can train an athlete to sprint while nasal breathing, to roll on the jiu-jitsu floor while nasal breathing. And only at the very, very end are we breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, maybe a little bit. I want you to get to the point. If you're not getting to the point, though, that you're breathing in and out through your mouth, because that's what I would consider the third gear. That's whenever it's like, wow, you're really pushing yourself hard. If you're not doing that, you're not really pushing yourself very hard, right?
Right.
But you would be surprised at just how hard you can go nasal breathing only. And then there will come a point when, okay, now I need to shift gears. But usually in the grand scheme of, if we're thinking about exertion, if you train your nose well and you're using functional breathing, and this is the magic that my athletes see and my people that I train see, because no one believes it until it's like, wow, I'm actually able to do this. You can get to about 75% of full exertion nasal breathing. And then about there is whenever you're doing,
well, you have to train to that. You don't start there.
100%. You
start much lower. You work on it.
That's where the
weeks
zone 2
go by.
cardio is, Jim. That's
right.
When it comes to zone 2 cardio, you should be able to carry on a conversation while doing that, right?
Right.
And that's the
what they're
classic
saying,
Cooperman line.
If you're jogging with people, you go at the speed where you can still talk to the person next to you, right?
And that's the place to train your sinuses, because most of us, and I still do 30 minutes of zone 2 cardio, specifically nasal breathing. It's perfect. But if I'm really trying to affect my cardiovascular system, if I'm really trying to push myself, well, okay,
sure,
we're going to need to push harder. And there's going to come a time whenever you should push so hard that you can't breathe in and out through your nose. Then the next step is in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then the next step after that, and usually this is the finish line sprint. This is I'm, maxing out. My coach is screaming at me, which is the good kind of screaming, because we occasionally really need it. I'm doing the burpees to to puke.
Right.
Okay, now it's in and out through the mouth.
Right.
And what you're going to find is by doing that, you actually enhance your overall performance. It takes some time. It's like learning how to type. Sometimes I talk about it. When I first learned how to type, I was doing way faster doing the one finger thing. But eventually,
the dysfunctional habit is fast at first until you learn a better way later. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Now, having said all of that, those are some foundational aspects of how breathing influences athletes in major, major ways. Now, let's talk a little bit about the daily habits, right? So the daily routines that you mentioned earlier, what would that look like? So
sure,
you might have there are techniques. Now you did the hyperventilative techniques where we did the breath holds and everything like that, right? So
30 to 40, hold
correct.
one,
deep breaths,
inhale,
right?
another 15 seconds, 3 to 4 rounds.
Exactly. You feel amazing. And so there's like Wim Hof made this really popular, but there's a lot of variations in this style of breathing. But basically, heavy circular breathing, and of course, the biggest benefit to doing this is that you can hold your breath for longer. Okay, so when I wake up in the morning, or I have people do this, so we can hold our breath, and one of the things you get from this is because you're holding your breath for so long, it tells parts of your physiology to produce more red blood cells. Okay. Now, if you want to find out more about this, we can talk about it, but ultimately, when we do hyperventilative techniques, so full breath in, let it go, and kind of, we start getting high on our own supply, so to speak. We can hold our breath for long periods of time. And what that does is it allows us to utilize what's called intermittent hypoxia. Now, people go to the mountains and train, like you said, in Colorado and things, so that they can train in a hypoxic environment, a low oxygen environment. But if you live here in the Midwest like we do, it's a lot of flat land. And so we don't have the mountains to use. But you can bring the mountains to you if you can give yourself doses of low blood oxygen saturation. So if you hold your breath for long periods of time, we're talking about a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, then your blood oxygen saturation actually comes down. Basically your body's going to respond by creating this hormone called EPO, and that causes you to produce more white blood or red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen, and that's why we want to use that hypoxic response. So guess what? Now, if we're carrying more oxygen, if we're doing that every day, and then we're breathing through our nose, we have functional breathing. We're not breathing through our mouth, so we're tolerating more CO2, because we know CO2 allows us to absorb that oxygen better. Now we've really made some modifications that we carry with us wherever we go. We need to train it every day. And there's ways, if you take a look at both of my books, I go into ways you can really increase CO2 tolerance in a heavy, heavy way. I also cover how to use this hypoxic training that I'm talking about. I have instructions in both of my books about how to do that. But if you're doing those things every day, then you're utilizing the two most important gases that you're working with when it comes to breathing. And then now you're walking around well oxygenated. You have a higher tolerance to CO2. And in some studies, they've shown that a higher tolerance to CO2. So if you got a higher score, let's suppose you got a 40 or 60 on the test that we did earlier, they've shown that you have a higher resilience to all stress. Just stress in general, you have a higher tolerance to. Wow. Okay. Now I'm walking on the court and I'm feeling confident. I'm not feeling the stress response as heavy. And now I can focus better. I can work better. I can have better endurance. My breathing is reinforcing positive things in my physiology and my nervous system. And if I feel a little bit shaken, if maybe, my girlfriend dumped me before the game or whatever, I can actually calm myself down using the techniques that we've also learned for in the moment. So the combination of the daily practice and the combination of in-the-moment techniques gives the athlete the ability to work with their physiology in real time so that they can make the gains in the gym, on the mat, on the court, wherever it is, so that whenever it comes time for, competition, they're absolutely prepared, mind, body.
Gotcha. So just quick recap, as much as you can through your nose and then shove all the air into your belly first and then fill up your lungs.
From the bottom up. That's a good way to look
from the
at
bottom
it.
up, from the bottom up. And then in the morning, work on that hyperventilation methods that Wim Hof and you put out there. Helps you handle more CO2 and then oxygen, higher levels, helps your body recover. And then it's a stressor, so it helps you handle stress more. So that later in the day or life, when there are increased loads of stress, your body's tolerance is built up. Your stress tolerance is stronger. So it takes more for you to actually be impacted. And then if you can handle more stress, then those things that made you nervous before, gave you anxiety before, not really that big of a deal, right?
Exactly. You're more resilient to those
more
things.
More resilient.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's only half the work, though. Then there's the temperature changes, right? The hot and the cold.
Yes. Cold training.
Right.
So cold training and heat training are modalities that mimic exercise. So there are a lot of benefits that we would associate with exercise. You also get with cold and heat training.
Sure.
They also offer additional positive benefits. We're working basically with the principle of hormesis, which is the principle if you stress yourself, if you offer enough of a stress, not too much, not too little, it's just like exercise really,
right,
that you will become stronger, more resilient as a result. This is one that I use often with police officers and with firefighters and other first responders, because when we put a person in a cold plunge, it's a very stressful situation, right? The nervous system is like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. You have the fight or flight response. I do some training. Actually, this Friday, I'll go back. So I work with the Indianapolis Police Academy, and I developed a program for them called Breathwork Tactics. So everybody that goes through the Indianapolis Metro Police Academy has to take my course. So they learn my techniques and methods. Well, what we have them do is we'll teach them all about how breathing influences their nervous system and how all this stuff works. And then at the end, we say, okay, now we're going to give you an opportunity. We're going to put you in a high stress situation, and we're going to give you an opportunity to see the power of your breath in regulating your nervous system. And we say, okay, go get your swimmers on. So then we put them in a cold tub, and we like to ask, okay, go ahead and recite the Indianapolis Police Department mission statement. And everybody's like, they can't think of anything because of the impact of stress on our brain, right? The prefrontal cortex starts to shut down. And so they can't think of anything. Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed with stress. I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice the technique we learned for in the moment. We do that. And then before you know it, one person starts to recite it, then another person, then it's another person. Before you know it, the whole room is like this thundering, everybody knows the code, right?
Sure,
and
right.
So when I train people with cold, the primary reason I train them with cold is to help them learn to deal with that stress response, because it's a safe way to put them in what your nervous system believes is a life or death situation. But you can just get them right out. It's not like, literally it will kill them if they stay in there long enough, but you can just take them out. So we put them in there for a minute or two, and they are able to get that nervous system under control, and they're able to think clearly under stress and pressure. It gives them that stress inoculation is sometimes what we call it.
So the cold therapy, a couple options. Jump in some water that's cold enough, or add some ice, right? Or take a cold shower.
Yep.
Right. Now, my wife and I, we've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Nice. Stuck with it.
Well, she finds it way easier to jump in the cold tub.
Yeah.
She thinks the shower is way harder, more painful.
I agree.
And I'm like,
Lucas, you're with us? All right.
I don't know, man. The whole thing in the tub is there's no place to hide there.
Yeah, that's true.
So if I'm on the shower, at least half my body's not getting hit with the cold water unless I'm right underneath it. So how could that be a thing?
Yeah, I know what you mean. No, there's a certain degree of, I think everyone it's a little bit of just preference, right? Because but I do hear more often than not, I hear, hey, once I started taking cold plunges, I didn't want to take a cold shower anymore. And I have to admit that I enjoy a cold plunge more than a cold shower. Although sometimes you just do what you got to do, and it's like, well, this is how I'm going to get my cold in today. So,
Right.
so it's just, I think, a little bit of preference. But I also think, I will say, I also think there is a significant disadvantage in only getting part of your body cold, right? So you're it's this confusion that kind of comes with it. Am I cold? Am I warm? Where is it? And so that's why you got to develop the cold shower dance. If you're in the cold shower, get some jams on, and safely, and we don't need any injuries, but try to really make sure that you sort of get all of everything wet as much as you can. I think, though, that the hypothalamus, which is the part of our brain that is responsible for thermal regulation, once it says everything's cold, it's like, wow, everything's cold. It's easier to uniformly thermoregulate than, okay, part of me is cold, part of me is not cold.
Right. So those guys that are sitting in the cold tub up to their waist, but their arms are out, half their chest is out, it gets confused. Right?
Yes. Yes. And so I don't know if I did
this. Where do I send help?
Exactly.
So what I remember from the tutorial was get in all the way up to your neck and put your arms into and just sit there, right? And then your body sees the stress coming at you, and you're kind of freaked out. Get back to breathing, calm yourself down, right? Don't fight there. Don't just sit there and fight it and tense up. Just relax. You're going to be in stress for a little while. You know it's coming. Just breathe. You are in control.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. You are in control.
It comes back to when you're trained, we're always training, right? You're never not really training. You're always training in some way.
And improving or training yourself to weaken and get worse. You're sending, bad habits, right? So
exactly. And so if you're training with a stressor, and the cold is a great example. If you train yourself to white knuckle it whenever you come under stress, well, that's how you're going to go. Yeah, good luck.
When it happens, yeah,
you're going to go white knuckling it.
Right.
If you
the notes I have in my book here from your workshop about the cold therapy: increase the stress to increase resilience. When it comes to the cold, you want to make sure that you respect it, because, like you said, if you're in there too long, you are going to die.
Yes, it is a lethal force.
Make it a little bit more fun, because pain's coming your way. You got to enjoy it a little bit. Core value. Be mindful and observant. See how your body is reacting to the thing, and then don't set records. It's not about your ego. So what I liked in your book also was something that we talk about with our athletes, whether it's nutrition, recovery, lifting. Here's what the book says.
Yeah.
We're going to squat 5x5. You need this many grams of protein. You need this many hours of sleep. Here's what we're going to say the book says in this range. What's more important is, how do you respond? How does your body adapt to what's going on? Does your squatting 5x5 cause adaptation? You get better, or that's not enough and you're actually weakening? Is the amount of protein you're bringing in enough, or is it not? Is your amount of sleep enough or not? You have your numbers. You make your bet on what helps you improve, and then you test it and see, right? How am I actually getting better or not? So, you might need 30 seconds of a cold plunge because you've never done it before. But after a while, maybe you're so inflamed, you need a full 5-6 minutes sitting in there and really kind of trying to make yourself get right. So, and at different times in your life when you're older, different metabolisms, different, makeup for your body, all those different factors means you'll need to do something differently for a different response. And you need that data so you can see, all right, what do I need to adjust this week? So talk about what I remember you said you worked with Wim Hof, and we'll talk about him in a second. I watched some of his videos. I watched his YouTube thing a couple times, and they bring these people all the way out to the Netherlands, and you're hiking in the snow, they're jumping in the water, and, I'm taking his little basic course on how to start with the cold therapy. And I was a big puss about it. And I call it doing the hokey pokey, where I take my whole hot shower, I'm cleaned up, and I'm done. And here's the shower head's right at me. I'm going to put just my right arm's going to get cold here for 10 seconds. And I'm like,
shake it all around.
shake it all around, right? The next couple of days later, I'm doing both arms, so I'm at 20 seconds. And then I signed up for your course, and I'm kind of sweating it. I'm already feeling a little nervous. Hey, this Saturday, we're going to be doing this stuff, and it's going to be a bunch of ice. This isn't going to be fun at all. I was getting stressed out just thinking about it. So what I did was like, you know what? I'm tired of this, worrying about what could be. Screw it. I'm just going to do it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to Tractor Supply. I buy this tub. I fill it with water and some ice.
My man.
My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I got this thing on Saturday. I'm kind of sweating it. So instead of sweating it for the next week, I'm just going to jump in now, so I know what it is."
Yeah.
And then so on Saturday, I'm like, "All right, well, okay. I have some reference point. I'll build up some more confidence. Well, I handled it before first, so I'm going to sit in here for 1 full minute. I don't give a shit, and see how it goes." So that come Saturday, you said, I think we did 90 seconds or 2 minutes.
Right. Only.
I'm like, all right, well, this sucks, but it sucked before and I was fine. All right, I should be fine. So, but talk about the little process with adding the cold therapy.
Yeah, when it comes to it, I recommend a person do it slow and steady and progress if you can. And I think even in the past couple of years, my view on cold training has progressed because I used to do cold training because of biological benefits, immune system boosting benefits, anti-inflammation, all those other things, and those are there. I don't want to say they're not there, but they're absolutely there.
Those are true and real, right?
Correct. But I would say that I would still do cold training even if they were not, because of the effect that it has on our psychology, and exactly what you just talked about there, right? You were feeling the very real effects of your nervous system predicting a potential dangerous event. And even though you knew I wasn't going to let you die, right? Or you assumed, you hadn't met me before, you didn't know who this guy was coming to town.
Right.
Yeah, throw you in an ice bath. You said, okay, I understand this is probably an irrational fear. I'm going to face this head on. Now, I will say the vast majority of people have troubles with this. In fact, I was on a call not too long ago. We're thinking about doing some research on the effect of cold training with addiction recovery, and there's a lot of research being done on these different modalities. Okay, so cold training in this case, cold training on that case. I think the most important thing you can get from cold training is the ability to say, I can make that difficult decision, right? And you jumped right into it. Not many people can. A lot of people have to. They say, I wouldn't dare do it until I was there at the workshop or the seminar because I want a professional to be there. I think it's awesome that you went ahead and did it on your own. But
I was just tired of sweating and be like, I'm nervous about this, and I was tired of that feeling. I'm like, fuck, I'm tired of this. No,
let's do it.
No.
Yeah, just get into it.
Yeah, let's get it over with.
And you're not locking yourself into something. You can get out at any time.
Yeah, right.
So it's something that there's you were experiencing physiological changes. I just kind of bring up, the organism of action that you are, right? So you were sweating it. You're noticing the stress response. You couldn't stop thinking about it. A lot of those things are unconscious processes that say, hey, there's this dangerous thing you need to figure out. And by just doing it, you were able to see yourself as a person who can do it. And so you see, people, I think the most valuable thing is to be able to see yourself as a person who can make difficult decisions, a person who can handle discomfort, and to be able to say, okay, I'm going to meet that head on, as opposed to someone has to force me into it or fate has to make it happen. I'm going to just meet it head on. I think that's awesome. I think that for the vast majority of people, cold showers are the best way to start. And I would say, just go to your shower, start with a warm shower, and then just progressively go colder until you get to where, okay, if I go any colder, I will be uncomfortable. And then just nudge it, right? So nudge your way out of your comfort zone. And know that you can always get out of the shower. It's not like it really is razor blades coming out of the shower. It's just water. And say, okay, you know what? This isn't so bad. And you mentioned how I emphasized having fun with it. I don't know if I mentioned it in the seminar that you attended, but I love to have awesome, cheesy 80s rock or like 90s rap whenever I'm
Right,
in
music.
a cold shower. Yeah, just have fun with it. And the thing is, what you're doing is you're associating stress with fun. And guess what?
Right.
What better thing can you do for your life than say, hey, whenever things get stressful, I can actually still have a good time. You know, so there's so much power.
The big takeaway.
Yeah.
So I came up to you after the course and you talked about the mindset approach and this. I'm like, well, you know, where's the big benefit there? It says, well, you saw something that you don't want to do and you handled it. So I like you getting done right away. So my default is to procrastinate on things that need to get done. Yeah. And with the shower constantly reinforces or the cold tub, there's a little bit of discomfort coming ahead of you. Go handle it right now so that when you get out, you feel better. So there's a little bit of discomfort coming ahead of you in this project. Get it done now. Don't let it hold over your head like I was going to have it for another week going into your seminar. Just get it done now, and then the stress goes away. And just turned 49. I've had X number of years of handling bullshit. I should be fine. This isn't going to be life and death. I should be fine.
You know, right? Mark Twain had a saying, and he said that if you eat a frog every morning for breakfast, nothing else the rest of the day can possibly be that bad. You know, and if
you have to eat a frog, eat it first thing in the morning, and if you have to eat 2 frogs, eat the big one first.
Yeah,
right.
And it's true.
That was it right there.
It's so true, right? Because if you voluntarily do this thing that you don't really, and for some people it's going to the gym. You know, I think, you know, if the three of us probably are the type of people that's like, man, if I only had another hour that I could spend at the gym, boy, wouldn't that be great, right? I have to pull myself away from the gym because it's like, man, but I could hang out here a little bit longer and do a little, maybe I'll do it. I could do deadlifts today. I'm that kind of person when it comes to training. But when it comes to the cold, even though I've been doing it for all these years now, there's some people that just get addicted and they can't help it. And I will say, when it comes to cold training, usually about 7 o'clock at night, 7:30, I get this urge. I'm like, it's right over here, guys. Like I just walk out the door. I got my plunge right there. I just hop in. Yes. You know, and then I come back in.
That's not me. I just do it because I have to. I know it's good for me. I like doing it. I like improving. I do not think, you know what sounds great right now. You know, so I'm not quite there yet. I did have a question about the cold.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw in the video that you were doing the other day, and then also Wim Hof had done it. Obviously, when you're in the water, you're losing that heat quickly into the water. It's different than simply being outside in 30-degree weather with a little bit of a wind. Right. So walking with your shoes on and just a bathing suit outside versus being submersed in water, but there still is benefit from being outside, right, in cold area, cold weather too, right? So talk to me a little bit about the benefits or practicality for being outside versus the water. Right now, I just usually use the water, but every once in a while I'll hike outside and not much, you know. So
well, the thing is, just kind of the foundation, and of course, going back to breath work, I talked about the conscious, unconscious, all these things, but the foundation of temperature or training, just in general, is that what we're doing is we're restoring stressors that we normally didn't have to our organism. Okay, so for instance, if you go out into space, you know, the cosmonauts that came back, they were, what was I forget, but this happens all the time. They go out into space, they come back, they've lost bone mass. They just simply the stress of gravity is important, right? We see this with little kids. If they don't get around and play and all these things, they have brittle bones, and we see it with elderly people. They have the sarcopenia, and then that, you know, all kinds of things. We need those stressors, and that is ultimately the benefits of cold and hot, right? The heat and cold training. Our ancestors, huge amount of our ancestry is from people who, during the daytime, you could have died of heat exposure, and at nighttime you could have died of hypothermia, right? So we have to understand that our species has an amazing capacity to deal with wide fluctuations in temperature. And our species, just like exercise, you know, we kind of had to reintroduce exercise. It's like, oh man, we're not working ourselves to death on the farm anymore, and we're less healthy. What's going on? You know, we had to reintroduce that. This is ultimately what temperature training is too. It's just reintroducing these stressors that we already faced as a species for thousands and thousands of years. It's just that we didn't realize they were part of what our nervous system expects. So going out into the cold, going into water, all of these things are just ways to put a little bit of more of that stress. So if you think about, okay, you can do high reps and low weight,
Sure.
and low reps, all these things. It's kind of similar to that. So when I go out to hop in my ice bath, I'm doing some deadlifts, right? I'm like, okay, some power training. If I go out and maybe just a cold shower, cool shower, and you don't have to, that's the thing. You don't have to get into ice baths. You don't have to do incredibly hardcore cold training to get the benefits. It's just like, hey, you know what? If people, we got these, they count their steps, right? And for a lot of people, that's wow, I got my steps in for the day. I don't normally even move around very much, but we know that just simply moving around is better than just being sedentary all day. So if you go outside, and there's research that shows that even just like in the 60s, right? Outside, inside, just in the 60s with very little clothing on, you can start to activate some of these systems. They start to come back online that have been dormant. And it doesn't have to be incredibly uncomfortable. Now, we all know that, whenever like my father's 75, if he says, hey, Jesse, if I say, hey, what do you do for exercise, Dad? He says, walking. Okay, that's pretty good for a 75. You're 75, 85. And now he also does some resistance training because, he's
that's better.
One of those old guys that I struggle to keep up with. He's like, Dad, you need any help? He's like, what? But the point is, when an older person, if they say, what do you do for exercise? And they walk. Okay, all right. But if it was a 20 something and they said, what do you do for exercise? You walk. It's like, okay, is that really exercise at that point? So it
all depends. For some people it is, because that's a lot for them. For some people that's a recovery, and some people it's nothing, right? So
and it's the exact same way with cold training and in heat training. So when you introduce it, when you're starting to introduce this new stimulus, this new stressor, you wouldn't go straight to 405 on the deadlift, right? First day. I mean, you couldn't.
Lucas
right?
would.
Lucas,
Lucas
you get under on the bench 405, Lucas, right? First day,
he can do that too.
Repping it out,
right?
So there's a certain degree of
there's the economic principle, law of diminishing returns, right? So you don't need to be in a cold tub for an hour.
Yeah.
But what I tell people, once you're used to it, anywhere 2 to 6 minutes, you're probably good.
Oh yeah.
For the day. So I always say 5. You get to 4 or 5 minutes, you start averaging it every day, you're good. Move on to your next task.
Yeah.
You don't need to start setting records.
Exactly. You're living life for your family, for your goals, for your loved ones, for your friends. You're not living life to sit in a cold tub. You sit in the cold tub so you can live a happier life. And so, I go out there and I don't even time it anymore. I just go out there. I stay in there as long as I want to. And then I get out and then, I go back inside, Sometimes I started using scented oils in my ice bath. I was getting to where it was freezing over. So I even got this Epsom salt, or it was Epsom salt that was lavender, and the wife liked it. Yeah, so I come in.
I had to put some chlorine tabs because there's green shit growing in my tub. So
yeah, I got to watch that. You got to change out your water, Jim. You got to change the water out occasionally.
That's what they tell me, but I'm just some redneck doesn't know better. There's a real, I don't know. And it's one thing that you read about how it helps you with your circulation, helps you with your recovery, your muscles, brown fat, etc. Well, my wife and I were very, very lucky and fortunate. Like her parents celebrated their 50th anniversary last year. So they took a trip, and they covered the expenses of their 2 kids. So my wife and her brother and their spouses, if they wanted to go. So we all went to Alaska. And we're out there on this whale watching tour, and it's 30 degrees. It's summer, or you're in the ocean or this inlet, and you're looking for whales, and it's a little windy and stuff. And we're there for a few hours.
Yeah.
And I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'3", 260. I used to be much heavier. But there's other people on this boat who are much, much heavier than that. And they're wearing winter hats, winter coats, gloves, thermal underwear, lined pants.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there in this T-shirt and this thermal shirt over it, like not even a jacket. And I walk over to my wife and I put my hand on her neck and she goes, "Well, Jimmy, your hand is so hot." Now I've always been warm natured, but I've never been like this, except when I was competing in strongman. I was 320 pounds. I'm strong and fatter, right? And so all that extra all those extra blood cells, capillaries, all that extra heat, but that's gone. And Jen's like, "Well, what's going on? Like, you've never been this hot before." I said, "Well, I'm outside in the cold right now, and it seems like what I call it. What I say is my pilot light kicked on. So when I get in the shower, the cold tub, I come out and the pilot light kicks on. And I'm out here for so long, like I'm not like boasting. It's just, I'm not cold." They're like, "What?" I go, I feel just fine." And she's like, "Yeah, you really do." And she goes, "Why is that?" I said, "All I can tell you is that I do 5 minutes in a cold tub or a shower every day. So maybe that's it. But that's only like where I could really say, wow, I'm really even warmer natured than I ever had been historically in my life." And whether I'm out exposed at a football game in the winter without a hat and gloves on, like I'm just good. It's weird, but I'm just not cold, as cold as I normally would be.
Yeah.
Is that one of the things you encounter or come across?
Yeah. What you're doing by regularly engaging with that stressor is you're reinforcing your natural ability to maintain your homeostatic state, right? So you're reinforcing all this vasculature that you have that can protect your internal temperatures, and you're also working with your metabolism. So what happens is you train. So your hypothalamus is what's regulating all your body temperature and everything. You're able to train yourself to be able to kick up your metabolism faster, and that is a thermogenic effect. And so that is a huge aspect. Now, that's not to say that if you cold train, you'll never feel chilly or cold. I'm sure there's times, but it is to say that you're far more resilient to all of these. I see people put on their winter coats like way too early, and my son, of course, being my son is just, I'm sure he'll have, I don't know, maybe he'll be traumatized by, okay, my dad loves to go out and roll around in the snow and all these things. But I tell him, okay, listen, he's like, I want to be strong with you, Dad. I want to go do these, frost walks and shirtless in the snow and stuff like that. And so I let him come with me on a lot of these, not incredibly long, but I tell him, listen, I know at school you're not cold. I know that. I know our moms, right, when they told us, put your coat on, you'll get a chill, right? They were doing it out of love. Right. And I say, listen, I know you're not cold. I know you're completely adapted. It's in the 50s. It's not that cold. But just so your teachers don't judge me and your mother, please.
I don't want the phone calls, right?
Yeah. And so
CPS.
Exactly. You come home, you can go out, run around in your t-shirt. It's totally fine. But just, we have a lot of misconceptions about being cold, about, how we should work with it. I mean, our concept of catching a cold comes from, there's this long period of history that we believed we were made out of 4 liquids called 4 humors. Bile, what is it? Blood, black bile, like
water.
It's like 4 liquids. What is it? It'll come to me as soon as I'm not on your podcast. But it was whenever these 4 liquids would become out of balance, and what would happen was if they became too cold or too hot, you would become ill. And
that's not a thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing. But this is back when they treated things with bloodletting, right? And the funny thing is, this form of medicine lasted all the way up to the late 1800s, right? So it's not that long ago that people still believed, well, if your humors get too cool, then that's why you catch cold. And
Gotcha.
there is some truth in the fact that if your body temperature, like if you let your core body temperature come down too far, yes, your immune system will take a hit and you're more susceptible to infection. So that's why we don't overtrain. We don't throw a person out there and say, hey, just go until you're miserable, until you just can't hardly
That's
walk.
not it. That's not what we're trying to do in the gym or in the kitchen or on the court, right? Yeah, so that's bad.
And so
you know what?
Yeah.
As a different example though, where I've seen it overtrained is that like my daughter, when she went to college for the first time, we live in the Midwest. She's down in Alabama, and she rolls in there, August, September. It's 99 for 5 months. It's January and it drops down to 65, right? So, and she's there for summer semesters at all. Man, it's real high. It's 103, humid. So when she's here for Christmas break, and she's like, man, it's 28 degrees, man. I really better bundle up. I'm like, well, that's a little different than how she used to be, right? Because she's now acclimated to living down there in that heat.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's hot out, she can handle it.
Yeah.
Well, when it's cold out, she's not used to it so much, right?
Yeah.
So on the heat component is that, the same principle. You go outside or in a sauna, for 2 to 5 minutes. It's 110 degrees. It's 120 degrees. You gradually add a stressor to your body, and then you start building up that tolerance as well because your body is learning how to acclimate again like it was originally designed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You develop an ability to handle extreme shifts in temperature. So your cardiovascular system will adjust. You become you experience what they call body hardening. So you're more physiologically able to handle these stressors. Now, there's all sorts of benefits, growth hormone, heat shock proteins, cold shock proteins, all these other things, immune system boost, all these other things that come with these extremes. We also see these in exercise. We see this in a lot of different ways that when we stress ourselves, we become stronger. But ultimately, you can.
That's the overarching principle.
Yeah.
Make yourself uncomfortable so you can handle challenges in life. Studying for the math exam. Make yourself uncomfortable practicing your homework so that when the big test comes, you're good. And now we just get a bunch of physical benefits by adding this micro dosages, 2 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Either way, hot or cold, your body's going to heal better. You're going to perform better as an athlete, first responder, et cetera. And then you have that confidence, which comes from the reps of handling more stress.
Exactly.
So that, hey, I handle this. Okay. I have this stressor coming up, this conversation with my teammate Lucas. And so it's a stressful conversation, but we're going to handle it. And then next time, we're going to remember, hey, we handled it last time, so we can handle it next time, as 100%. Well. I said a few more questions. I know we've had you on here for a while, and I don't want to, as much as I would like to,
we
keep you here all day.
This has been fun.
Right? This is all fun stuff. When you are when you're trained though in the gym, because it's not just like you said, woo woo foo foo bullshit where we're doing all this cold stuff because it's pie in the sky. Right. You actually lift weights and do cardio and all that stuff. What do you like to listen to when you're training?
I'll either listen to Viking music or metal, or Viking metal, like the fusion of the two. So
sure. Now you've had to travel. You've been to the Netherlands. You've been to Wim Hof's place. You've been to his. You're certified in his teachings here when he had the courses here in the U.S. Where's an adventure you'd like to go that you haven't been yet?
I would love to go to Australia. I have friends there. It seems like an amazing place. It's this whole giant continent that is on the other side of the globe. And so I'm hoping to get to go there someday.
Awesome. Favorite sports movie?
Rocky IV. That was a whole just a
Ivan
montage.
Drago.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the montages alone, right? It's just amazing.
Amazing. If you're watching a sport, which is your favorite one to watch?
Either bodybuilding or sumo wrestling.
Wow, completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Totally different body types. But man, I started watching sumo wrestling. It was like crazy. And I just couldn't stop. So yeah. It was awesome. It's weird sports usually.
Who's your favorite athlete to watch perform?
So the current Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, is a guy I used to work out with a lot. Actually, he was a student of mine at whenever I used to teach at the university. So I do have a favorite professional athlete, and maybe I'm a little the
Biased,
kid.
right?
The kid was, I'm very biased. Just a real nice guy and real down to earth guy. So he's the guy I like to cheer on the most.
If you can pick one favorite book, what would that one be?
Yeah, see, this is so I'm a recovering English professor, so it's not going to be something really cool, but I would say The Clockwork Orange, maybe.
No, Ken. Stanley Kubrick movie.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
Favorite superhero?
Let's do
In books, in movies, in comics, I don't care.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do Superman. Yeah.
Favorite villain?
Yeah, we'll go with straight Lex Luthor. We'll stay in that universe.
All right. Favorite lift in the gym?
Deadlift.
Deadlift, right? If you had 10 million, what job would you do?
If I had $10 million,
Mm-hmm.
what job would I do?
Yeah, what profession? Where would you be? What would you be working on? What would you be doing?
I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
All right. Favorite quote?
You can't direct the winds, but you can adjust your sails. And that's a sailing, it's a Phoenician saying.
Gotcha. Where can people find you online?
You can go to jessecoomer.com. That's JESSECOOMER.com. You can also go to breathworktactics.com if you're a first responder and if you'd like to learn. I offer a certification in my my techniques, and I also do speaking engagements as well. We have a retreat that's actually coming up in April. It's for first responders. It's just outside of Indianapolis, and there's the details there. You can also you can find me on Language of Breath Collective. That's a long URL, but it's languageofbreathcollective.com. And that's where I also offer another certification in breathwork. If you're not a first responder, it's a very deep dive breathwork certification. You can find me on YouTube. If you just type in Jesse Coomer on YouTube, you'll find my channel. And you can find me on Instagram at Jesse Coomer Breath.
Awesome. For anyone, all the other listeners of the show, we've been getting some questions and thoughts or ideas, or people had thoughts or they want more explanation on certain things. Send the questions to us at info@athlete-builder.com, and they'll come right to our inbox, and then we'll put together some Q&A sessions to answer things on how to get people better. Hey, Jesse, man, thanks again for all the time. Great seeing you.
Yeah,
really,
it's been fun.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's a good time. So appreciate what my wife and I will really like from this episode is that there's a lot of nerd shit,
A lot
in
of
this
nerd
one.
shit. Yeah.
A lot of nerd shit. And we like that. And so there's a whole bunch of whys as to why we're doing it for people that need that so they can believe in it. But then there's also, hey, just do these things and you will be better. If they simply just trust us, great. If you have to earn the trust, that's fine too. Here are the whys behind it. So, Jesse, thanks so much, man. We'll be catching you around, and when you're in Indianapolis, we'll hook up again.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right.